And the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. O Lord God, Jesus Christ, divine physician of our souls and bodies, we ask you to look upon us and guide us and direct us in all your will, protecting us and watching over us, and help us through our daily lives and our concerns and our endeavors. We ask you to bless this evening and our gathering in your name, together with your eternal Father and life-giving Spirit, now and ever and forever. Amen. Christ is among us.
He is and ever shall be.
Ever shall be. Thank you so much. Well, thank you everyone for joining us tonight to talk about this very important topic. I just want to introduce myself and give you a little bit of an orientation to Zoom, and then I'll introduce our panelists. I'm Christina Andreessen. I'm the manager for chapter relations for Orthodox Christian Fellowship, and I'm joined by Father Miles, who is currently serving as our national chaplain. So we are here to help host this webinar, as well as answer any questions you might have about OCF. If you haven't been on a Zoom webinar before, let me just help you out a little bit. Across the bottom, you'll see a box for Q&A. At any point during the webinar, if a question comes up for you, please feel free to put it in the Q&A, and we will answer your questions at the end. So don't worry, we will get to them. We'll answer them live. And then there's also a chat if you want to speak to each other. If you want to share ideas or thoughts or comments as we go along, you can use the chat at the bottom. With that, I'd just like to introduce our panelists and our topic tonight. So tonight we're talking about addressing student mental health. As Orthodox Christians, you as lay and clergy advisors, working with college students, what you can do to feel more equipped to address student mental health in a holistic Orthodox way. And tonight we're joined by our two panelists, Father Patrick Tishel, who is an archpriest of the Bulgarian Orthodox Diocese of the US, Canada, and Australia. He's the pastor of Holy Resurrection Orthodox Church in Allston, Massachusetts. He has been the spiritual advisor for the Boston University OCF, as well as a member of our board of directors, and has worked with the OCF chapters both at BU and at other campuses for 10 years. He's the founder and headmaster of the St. Herman of Alaska Christian School, which is the only Orthodox Christian elementary school K through 8th grade in Boston, now in its 28th year. He speaks frequently on the topics of education, family life, and spiritual life, and he has been a presenter at various conferences on education and Orthodox spiritual life, including at Boston University, Gordon College, and Hellenic College, Holy Cross. He's also been a guest speaker at other parishes across the US, Canada, and Bulgaria. He's married to his wife, Popadia Paula, for 38 years, and they have two children, Father Michael, who was the director of the Crossroad program and teaches at Hellenic College, and Popadia Vera, who's married to the assistant pastor of his parish, Father Theodore, and she is the director at the Children's Hospital and active in the parish. And then we are also joined by Christy Buck, who's the executive director of the Mental Health Foundation of West Michigan. After graduating from Michigan State, she began her career working in mental health. With 31 years of experience in the field, her passion for transforming and saving lives through mental health education led her to develop two classroom programs, Live, Laugh, Love for middle and high school students, and Be Nice. Since 2006, she and her staff have passionately presented to over 200,000 people in West Michigan on mental health awareness, bullying, and suicide prevention. Christy regularly delivers speaking engagements to community and business groups on mental health awareness. Through her presentations, participants learn more about mental health and depression, about themselves, and about stigma and its disastrous effects on people living with mental illness and those that love them. Christy serves on the Granville School Board and is involved with numerous community organizations and coalitions. Within Holy Trinity Greek Orthodox Church, she has served as the Goya advisor and instructed religious education for 30 years. And she was also a Rose City counselor, Ionian Village camper, and counselor. With that, I'd like to turn the floor over to them. We're going to walk you through a little bit about what is mental health and how to approach it from an Orthodox perspective.
Good evening. So I'm going to take the reins here to explain really simply what is mental health. And we instruct kindergartners in our programming too. So this is how I'll explain it to them. It is how you think, act, and feel. And that is so easy to describe and to talk about that when that begins to be compromised is when we really need to be looking at and understanding, is there something going on with their mental health that may be something that I'm to be concerned with? So I'm going to go through a few stats right now. And then in addition, when I take the reins again later, I am going to introduce you to a model that has been created. I'm the founder of, and this is called Be Nice. And it actually is a tool that if you put this into play, and I'm going to be honest with you, you can save, change, and improve lives. And it's something really easy. So I'm just going to start with a little facts here. And that is 1 in 5 will struggle with a mental health disorder in a given year. That is all people. 1 in 10 will have a serious mental health disorder that might need some type of attention. 1 in 4 college students will experience a depressive episode by the time they are 24 years old. And when I'm talking about depression, I am talking about the illness, okay? I'm not just talking about a mood change that, oh, I'm depressed today. This is when we need to take it seriously, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Depression is the leading cause of disability in the United States, over back problems, over heart disease. This is something that we need to take serious. Half of all mental health disorders, this is huge, I'm going to repeat it. Half of all mental health disorders begin by the age of 14 years old. And so this can come in the way of anxiety, attention deficit disorder, ADHD, OCD, all of these different things that we need to be talking about. So half of these begin by the age of 14, 3/4 by the age of 24 years old. So we have this window of opportunity amongst all of you who are here today on the webinar. And then in addition, so many people within our church that see kids growing up, religious advisors and Goya advisors, all of those folks. Depression left untreated, sadly so, can lead to school failure, job loss, substance use disorder, and the most daunting statistic is that it can lead to, depression untreated can lead to somebody taking their life. And so what we know is suicide is the second leading cause of death amongst college students, the second leading cause of death amongst 10 to 24-year-olds. This is unacceptable in a world that we know that if we can begin to notice changes in someone's behavior at the onset, I can actually take serious enough to save someone's life. 9 out of 10 times when someone dies by suicide, it is because they have an illness called depression and possibly in combination with substance use disorder. We need to begin to talk about this. In addition, one more stat is that white males accounted for 7 out of 10 suicides in the year 2016. So we need to be talking about this illness and we need to be taking it very seriously. Okay, so those are some stats.
Okay, so may I say something?
That's you, you're up.
Okay. Thank you. I mean, I remember hearing that last time we talked, and I think, Christy, you're telling us how many people are being overwhelmed in this area, leading to chronic depression and suicide. And we're also informed by you that depression and suicide is on the increase, from I think what you said to me last time. So this for me, and I think for all of us, is very disturbing and sobering. And we need to examine what's going on, the causes and the remedy. And if there were bubonic plague or Spanish flu rampaging through the world, we would be researching to find out the cause and the cure. So I think that Christy will be talking about the immediate care that needs to be taken and action. And this is very important because when people are on the, are dangerous to themselves, then we have to do something immediately. And I would like to talk somewhat about the deeper causes which end up becoming an ever-present crisis. So first, it'd be good to talk about what is mental illness, or as one of the theologians, Jean-Claude Lachey, calls it as mental disorder. I like that term also. And in order to talk about mental disorder, we have to also talk about mental health. What's expressed in the Bible, the scripture, as a sound mind. And the sound mind, or the mind, this mind be in you that was also in Christ Jesus. This is, you could say, the scriptural expression of mental health. The word for sound mind that's translated sound mind can also include, or does include, a mind that's been delivered, rescued, revived, salvaged, protected, and brought into a place of safety and security, so that's no longer affected by illogical, unfounded, and absurd thoughts. So mental health, according to this one theologian who wrote a very good book called Mental Disorder and Spiritual Healing, he exposes that there's different causes for this. Some of them are organic. For example, when there's insufficient electrolytes, certain drugs can cause mental imbalance. I remember at a old SCOBA conference, one of the psychologists there said that her husband was taking some heart medication, and then he was starting to talk about suicide, and he never thought about that before. And his wife realized that, you know, this was one of the side effects of the drug. It also could be other disorders like insomnia, meningitis, Parkinson's disease also can be related to these things from an organic point of view. And then he said there's a spiritual and psychological causes of mental disorder. And then lastly, demonic. And so it's not just that somebody, you know, has an illness. That's not the only cause of mental disorder. That's the point. And the other thing is, for college students, I think, you know, we have to talk about the fact that they're developed over so many years. And I think it's important, while we're looking at the immediate problem, also to look at the developmental problem, what's been going on in life and what's going on in their life right now. And maybe I could talk about that a little bit later in terms of formation and foundation.
Okay, and I'm going to take it from here to talk about recognizing. I loved your comments, by the way, too, Father Patrick. Extremely enlightening, and I liked how you went into the explanation of that organic piece and spiritual and demonic. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about this action plan that I am the founder of, and it's called Be Nice. And it's actually a dedicated program, and I'll do a little ad that if people go onto the website and look at benice.org, they can actually take the pledge and hear a lot of these things again that I'm talking about, and maybe have a greater understanding how you even could implement this program into your own foundation of your work that you're doing with college students. So we talked about that there's not one single cause for depression, and there's a lot of factors that can lead to this. So we know some of the risk factors that I need to notice. That is the first step, is a greater understanding of what can affect kids' lives, living away from their family, missing their family and their friends, and that would be thinking that they're missing out on things that are going on while they're not at home anymore. Feeling alone or isolated, and so many times they're put into situations with roommates they have nothing in common with, even though they try to do this via interviews and having people chat before you get to college. There is always that feeling that I'm still lonely and I still feel isolated. Experiencing conflict in relationships, so that could be on the floor where I live, within the dorm. But then in addition, it can be that loss of those relationships that I had back at home. So we know that many times when people are coming to college, they often can be breaking up with relationships that they have had such intense feelings for, that leaving those loved ones behind. In addition, facing new and sometimes difficult schoolwork. A lot of times kids are coming to college and this is their first experience really being away from home, or it also could be they're happy to be away from home, but they've never lived on their own before. Mm-hmm. So also, you know, there's problems with selecting what I'm going into. And this is what I often see, is where kids they don't even know what they're going into, and they're spending all this money, and suddenly I'm in the wrong field. I don't even like what I chose as my major, and I took all these classes. So then we're looking at that whole worrying about finances too. So I'm looking at noticing. So the plan of Be Nice is to notice what is good, what is right, what is different. So if I know what is good, what is right, and so here I am faced with all these new students that I'm assigned to. I'm the OCF leader. I'm working as the parish guidance person. I'm here working with these students. I'm noticing what is good, what is right, and that's what I want to do right off the kickoff. I'm noticing what is good, what is right, and then with those two skills, I am able to notice what is different. I'm able to look at these risk factors that I just talked about, that all these students are undergoing when I come to college, and I'm going to start noticing what is different. And what I'm looking at, and I like to look at noticing of signs and symptoms of depression as threefold. I'm looking at these physical complaints that they might be talking about. So they might be seeing me at my meetings every week. Whenever I'm meeting up with the students, I might have a connection with them through text messaging. Geez, I'm just not feeling good. Well, what is going on? Well, I've got these stomach aches. I've got these aches and pains. I'm losing weight. Okay, so these can be signs and symptoms. Then I'm going to start looking behaviorally. I might start putting these pieces together, look at behaviorally what's going on. All of a sudden, this person that was bubbly, cheery, excited to be at school, suddenly crying spells, withdrawing, telling me that they've got these anxious feelings, these gut aches, changes in my work habits, not being able to keep up with my studies, loss of interest in my personal appearance. And I'll be honest with you, yeah, sometimes when we're in college, we're wearing sweats every day. But when this becomes the manner of their appearance all the time, not taking showers, unable to get dressed in the morning, unable to respond to text messages, these are the clues and the warnings. I'm putting this all together. I'm looking at the risk factors, because college students have a lot of risk factors, okay? But now I am noticing the changes in their behavior. In addition, psychologically, and this is where the clues and warnings are going to come through sadness in their speech, talking about missing home, talking about missing things that they had at home, talking about not being able to engage with other students, not getting along with my roommate, self-criticism, self-blame, I'm a terrible person, I'm a burden to my family. I mean, these are these conversation pieces that would cause me, seriously, cause me to be concerned that this depression could lead them to possibly dropping out of school, okay, and maybe possible thoughts of suicide. And so this is where I have to take seriously where people are seeing myself in a negative light. And this is where I have got to move on to the next step of the plan, and this is to invite. So remember, that first step is notice what is good, what is right, what is different. I'm looking at the risk factors, and I'm looking at the signs and symptoms of depression. And I'm taking seriously this enough for 2 weeks or longer, mark change in this person's behavior in combination with these risk factors. So I'm going to move on to my next step, which is to invite. I'm going to invite myself to have this amazing, loving, caring conversation. And this is going to be to have a conversation with this person, a serious conversation that is going to start with the conversation of, hey, this is what I have noticed. I'm going to talk about the good, the right. When you first got to college, you were really excited. What is going on? I'm noticing a difference. I'm noticing that you're not taking care of yourself. I'm noticing that you're not going to school. You're telling me about your grades being bad. And I want to talk to you about this. I'm going to invite myself to have this loving, caring conversation. I'm going to tell them what I have noticed. And then I'm going to talk a little bit more. Have you spoken to anybody else about feeling this way? These questions lead myself to have a greater understanding that maybe they're seeking counseling right now. Maybe they've never talked to anybody about this because they're embarrassed. This may be their first time ever telling someone that they're feeling like this. I'm going to ask them, how long have you been feeling this way? Because a lot of times this may be the first loving, caring conversation they're having. And now I'm asking them, how long have you felt this way? I've been feeling this way since the day that I decided to come to school here. I've been feeling this way since I was 14 years old and I've never talked to anybody. This could be the first time that they've actually engaged in a conversation. And, you know, I look at a lot of times, this could be the first time that they're going to be opening up. Maybe they've never had confession. Maybe they've never had somebody pray with them so deeply that this could be the first thing for them that could bring about healing and could bring about compassion. Then there's another question. I love this question, and this is still under my invite plan. Is there anyone or anything that has ever helped you in the past? And I'm going to tell you why that's such an important piece of the pie. That is that piece that helps that person also figure out that within myself, I might already have a tool there that's necessary. And those are called coping skills. And a lot of times kids don't. They're mama bear. They have their parents taking care of themselves, and they don't even know that possibly within themselves, they have coping skills. So that is that invite. I'm going to invite myself to listen. Listening means empathy. Listening doesn't mean that I'm giving them those answers. Listening means I am engaging myself in this conversation. Next step is to challenge. And challenge is big because this is where I'm going to be challenging myself to go one step further. And that could be to challenge that person's stigma that they might have about themselves, that people think I'm crazy, people think I'm nuts. Okay, that is stigma. No, these feelings are real. This could be the onset of what is called a mental illness, where somebody might need some help, assistance. Me, as the person that is implementing this nice plan, I want to make sure that person knows that I'm not stigmatizing. I want to make sure that that person believes that I want to be aware of how they're feeling. I want to take away attitudes and thoughts that I might have about that person, because I'm going to tell you, this can form this thing that this person will never want to reach out again the minute I engage in stigmatizing conversation. I want to focus on positives. I want to focus on helping this person. Next part of this challenge is I want to stick to those questions that I talked about in invite, but I'll be honest with you, the biggest challenge is to take suicide very seriously. And this is where the step in this action plan is so serious, because we know that 50% of people who die by suicide have never, ever received help. 70% of people who have seriously thought about suicide, 70% communicated their intention to family and friends. And this is going to be through understanding psychologically when a person is talking about feelings of hopelessness, worthlessness, talking about the inability to find a solution to their frustrating circumstance. So I am going to take suicide very seriously. 50% of people who die by suicide die by the result of their first try. And this is where it really is daunting, is that our brain is developing until we're 26 years old. And so when you look at these students, they're between 18 and 22 years old. That's about the average age on college campuses. Their brains are still developing. And there's a part of the brain that is not fully formed. And this is the part of the brain that we really have to be concerned about. And that is the part of the brain that it is in charge of impulsivity. So this is where I'm talking, this statistic of 50% of people who die by suicide die by the first try. That is because it's impulsive. And sometimes they don't even realize that they can die. So part of challenge is to actually ask the question to the person. If I am so concerned that this person could be at risk to take their lives, asking the question, are you thinking of suicide, does not raise that person's intention. It only really brings about the conversation that is so important to have. And I teach a whole course on just how you ask this question. I just right here today, I'm really stressing the importance that if anyone is ever feeling like someone might be thinking of suicide, it's really important to ask that question. And how you ask that is just that. Are you thinking of suicide? And I'm concerned enough to say this to you right now. I'm concerned enough to ask you, are you thinking of suicide? Again, risk factors for suicide, depression, number one, 9 out of 10 times. Other risk factors for suicide are stressful events that they can't find a solution to. And this is why it's so important for me to be this person that can say, you know what? I'm going to help you. I'm going to help you find help. I am going to, I'm going to pray with you. I am going to open up conversation about this. I am not going to dismiss these feelings. I'm going to take it really serious. And this is where that last step of the action plan is to empower. So it's to notice, to invite, to challenge. Last step, empower. And this is where I want to give a person hope. And this is where empowerment is relating to that person to help them to see the protective factors that they have in their life right now. And number one is that they have access to services at their disposal, okay? And those are on campus. So most college campuses have counseling services. Is this person that I am engaging this conversation with, are they utilizing the services? Do they even know where the services are? Okay, those are two huge protective factors. In addition, protective factors are those things that that person might already have right at their disposal right now. These are having communication with a person that wants to have a conversation with them. So this could be you. This could be our OCF people. This could be the people that bring them to understand that, look, I'm going to help you. I'm going to be a positive role model. I'm going to help you to go to services. I'm going to engage you in your faith. I am going to help you understand the power of prayer. And this is huge. Evidence, scientific evidence shows that prayer can work like an SSRI. Okay, those are medications for depression. That prayer can have an effect on the chemistry in your brain to make and help you feel better. It's so awesome and it is so engaging that we need to explain that. It's not the only thing, because you have to have it in combination with other things, combination with positive people, combination with utilizing services, possibly medication. So maybe this person has already come to college having been on medication. Let's get you back to that point, okay? In addition, good coping skills, understanding what has helped you in the past, having and keeping strong morals. So it's that sense that come with me every week, let's meet, let's talk about God, let's meet, okay? So I want you to understand the importance of your role on these college campuses. A couple protective factors surrounding suicide. This is internally, what do they have inside themselves? Are they able to cope? Do they have religious beliefs? Do they have a frustration tolerance? Okay. Externally, responsibility. Responsibility to other friends, responsibility to family, okay? That's not going to keep them alive per se, to say your parents would be so disappointed if they lost you. No, they don't care at this point. So I just wanted to get across those big things. So the plan is notice, invite, challenge, and empower. So I'm handing this off to Father.
Thank you, Christy. I really appreciate that. I just wanted to take a minute to highlight the fact that I think it's easy for some of us to think that, especially with suicide, that this might not be our kids. And I will just anecdotally tell you one story from my own experience working with OCF. As an advisor at a college conference, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I sat in a small group of students, so maybe 10 or 12 students. We were in a breakout, and they were sharing some vulnerable things about themselves, and every single student in the circle shared either a story of having lost someone to suicide or having been suicidal themselves. In a group of 15 college students, every single one of them had been affected directly in some way by depression and suicide in their own lives. So I think it's very important for us to know that this is our kids too. In addition, I thought it would be a good time to also share that we have a couple of students who have been willing to share a little bit of their own experience with anxiety and depression. And in the church, on our OCF blog, we have a couple of reflections that students have shared and about how Christ and the church has kept them alive. We had one student write how Christ has kept them alive through their depression. So again, just stressing that these are our students, and it is our responsibility to be there for them, to notice and invite and challenge and empower. But also, and this is, I think, my way to transition to Father Patrick, to be attentive to their whole spiritual life in a really deep and meaningful way at all times, so that we're moving towards, as Father Patrick mentioned earlier, mental and spiritual health and away from disorder. So I think with that, Father Patrick, I'll hand it to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Christy. I'd like to just switch a little bit to take a look at a different angle of mental health and mental illness. Herotheos Vlachos, Metropolitan Herotheos Vlachos, in his book on Orthodox psychotherapy, he said that the real mental illness is in abandoning God and the church. And, this, I'd like to kind of keep that in the background, that the church itself is not just some place that we go to, that we get solace from, but the church, as the scripture says, it's the ground of our being, the understanding that God became man for our sake. He became man so that we could become like him. And that becoming like him is oftentimes filled with a struggle. But we have to, we come into life, we're alive, and a lot of times, do we even know why we're here or what our goal is? If, we were to start a race at some point and the guy would say on your mark, it said go, but we didn't know where we were going, it would be a race where we'd kind of be using up our energy, but not really getting to the goal. So the idea of knowing what the goal of human life is not just a philosophical question, it's a very real question, because then it puts everything else into context. I'd like to say, as strongly as I can, that what the gospel says and the Holy Father say, that our life is in heaven, which means that we're just here for a time and a purpose, and we have a time limit, something like shelf life in the supermarket. After that, it gets taken off the shelf. And then we're supposed to accomplish something. And that something is to know God, to not just know about God, but to actually know God. And by this, we come to know ourselves, made in his image, and to work on, through this life, working on his commandments. Bishop Saint Ignati Bryanjaninov says that in a very nice book called The Arena, he says, unless the human being is working on the commandments, to obey the commandments, he ends up, or she ends up, following, being obedient to their own emotions. And so there's a practical side of following Christ in it, but then also we see its implications in our own inner world. So if we know this, that the goal is to know God, even as a hypothesis that we can try, we could test out, then we see our struggles in a different way. So it's important to see the goal. And one example I heard about is a guy who trained to cross the English Channel, and he was really good. He was making headway, and then all of a sudden a fog came in, and his mind started going. He didn't see where he was going anymore, and he finally just gave up. And then when he got into the boat, the fog lifted, and he saw he was just a mile away from the other side of the channel. And so it's important when we're living our life to have the goal in mind, so that we don't just get discouraged. And also it's important to know what to expect. The Lord said, "These things I've spoken unto you, that in me you might have peace." And I like this part. "In the world you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer, I've overcome the world." I think it's important for young people, for all of us, old people too, to know that in the world we're going to have trouble, and not to have the expectation that in the world everything's going to go our way, and if it doesn't, that there's a problem. As a matter of fact, sometimes when things are going our way, there might be more of a problem. So we ask the question, why do I face so many difficulties? Maybe something's wrong with me. The fathers tell us that this is not the case. There's nothing wrong. In some cases, what we're doing, even like with mental problems and struggles, one of the fathers say that, or this was actually a saint, Maria of Gacina, she said to some people who were dealing with mental disorders and depression, she said sometimes it's because, there's sins, but sometimes it's just a cross that we have to bear. And we could say to the Lord, Lord, if it's possible, like the Lord said, Father, if it's possible, take this cup from me, but not my will, but your will be done. Because sometimes in bearing whatever troubles, there's something very positive that happens in our soul. So the other thing in terms of knowing what to expect, we're baptized, and even though, little babies, sometimes we hold them up and say, behold, the warrior of Christ, this little baby slumped over. And because, even though they're just a baby, that's what they're growing up to be, the warrior of Christ. And therefore, they have to learn as a warrior how to be temporarily defeated and how to get up again. In judo, which I observed in college, the first thing they teach you in judo is how to fall, because you're going to be spending a lot of time in judo falling. And I wonder if that wouldn't be of some help if we knew that there was such a thing as falling and getting up. That's what fathers say is the one thing that a Christian has to keep on learning is get up again. And the other thing I wanted to mention is there's a building in Boston called the Hancock Building. They used to call it Plywood City because it's a gigantic building and it's going to be all glass. But whenever they put the glass in, the glass would come flying out. And so they had to cover it with plywood temporarily. And until they found out that the problem was with the foundation and the core, that it was the wind factor, which they didn't take into consideration, was twisting the core. And by Bernoulli's principle, the glass would fly out. And when they fixed the core and the foundation, then the glass was able to stay. So I think it's very important, and this is something that I felt I've talked about to a lot of college students and to pastors and at the OCF board, the idea that our young people get education through Sunday school, and sometimes that's the last time they're educated in the Christian life. There's so much really in terms of training and formation. It's kind of like going into battle and not giving people the armor. And I'll talk a few minutes about what that armor is. But Saint Theophan the Recluse has an excellent book, exquisite book called The Path of Salvation, where he talks about the formation of a child, the soul, and he talks about the powers of the soul, of the will, of the desire, of the intellect, and how a parent can strengthen those, make the will strong, but the will towards God and towards following the parent, not just self-will, and hope to cultivate good desires, not sinful desires, by pandering to the child all the time, and filling the child's thoughts and senses with positive things, not harsh music or unclean images, and so this. And also introducing the child to the church life, icons, monasteries, and prayer life. They say unless a child prays at home, they'll never be at home in church. And so there's a lot to formation, to knowing the scriptures, to being conversant, to having these stories in their mind. And right now, we're so inundated with media that you wonder, I'm not saying that there aren't the disease of depression, but you wonder in the world that we're living in now, it's so disjointed, where families are broken up, where people are on media, young people are on media 5 to 9 hours a day, why, maybe this is contributing somewhat to the mental disruption. So in terms of some of the sources of anxiety and depression, I'm just listing some that came to my mind. One of them, I think, is big time with young people: irregular sleep habits. Whether it's a cause or an effect, I think to some extent it's a cause. And especially young people who are addicted to gaming. they, as you know, Christy, and the pastors and other people here know that people in gaming, they'll go till 2, 3, 4, 5 in the morning and then get up and sometime, I don't know when, and start their day. So irregular sleep patterns, a spiritual immaturity and ignorance. Sometimes, as I said, education just stops with Sunday school. Infrequent and irregular prayers. There was just one woman who I went to visit doing house blessings, and she said to her husband, who doesn't do this, that unless I pray in the morning and read the gospel and the epistle, I feel terrible. And I have all these kind of thoughts, but when I do this, I feel fortified. Irregular church attendance, unrepentant and unconfessed sins, and no spiritual consultation, no confession or spiritual father. Overabundance of hearing the bad news. A lot of people are just addicted to the news, listening to what's going on, and they don't hear enough of the good news. Uncontrolled inner conversations, and peer pressure, man-pleasing, trying to please all their friends, perfectionism, procrastination and homework. There's no time for homework, no planning and no future. And some of the antidotes, I would like to impress that in the church, as you said, Christina, about the person who felt that they had problems, but they felt while they were chanting, they were uplifted from the problems. In the world, you'll have trouble, and in your world, and you'll have trouble. Be of good cheer, overcome the world. So regular sleep patterns, breaking bad habits, developing good ones, cultivating your life in Christ and in the church. And two themes of that are, one is what Elder Nectari of Optina calls capturing the grace of the day. Every day, reading the gospel, the epistle of the day, reading the life of the saint, and the life of the saint, those three things. And he said, this is the Holy Spirit talking to us directly, and not just being hearers of this, but actually and taking it and trying to apply it in our life. Really living within an atmosphere of the church, and not in a secular atmosphere all the time, and sprinkling a little church life on top of it. And the other thing, which I think is totally underrated and not used at all, hardly, is the hidden medicine of confession. That I don't think it's really taught, I don't think it's really promoted, but confession under the epitracheal of the priest, speaking to Christ about what's on our hearts, and having Christ enter into our hearts and lifting the sin is an amazing thing. And just to end, I would like to say we can't always control our circumstances or even our thoughts, but we can and must be responsible by how we respond to them, and by using the medicine of the church that's there. And Elder Sophrony, who was big time spiritual giant, he said, yeah, live the spiritual life, but sometimes the intensity is so great that you have to step back and have a cup of tea. So there's that side of it also. Okay. I can speak more, but I want to leave a little room for questions and things like that.
Yes, I do. I love that quote from Elder Sophrony. I take that very seriously in my own life. Thank you so much, Father Patrick. If anyone has questions, now would be a wonderful time to send them in, either for Christy or for Father Patrick. I know that when we post the webinar's recording, we will also be posting links to Christy's program. As she said earlier, if you can go and take the pledge, you can learn a little bit more about what her organization does, as well as links to some of the books that Father Patrick has referenced. I have a question that comes in. If either of you know if there is an established connection between depression and mental illness and screen time.
Yes. So, as of recently, I mean, this is really, I even like to say that mental illness is new, even though it's been around, disturbances with the mind since as old as the philosophers in Greece. We know that there's research going on all the time. And so all of these things that might bring about a change in someone's behavior. So social media is one of the number one number one things that's happening right now. So we know that we need to curb screen time big time. Father was right on when he said that kids are spending between 5 and 9 hours a day on social media. And, it's really important that we as OCFers and people that are working with students, that they understand this. And sometimes I like to challenge students that I'm working with to pick up your phone and actually go to your settings and find out how much screen time you are on your phone. And that is really enlightening to a lot of folks to see that. In addition, you're just privy to so many things. I mean, these ads that overtake our lives that lead us then to get deeper into the internet. And right there, one of the biggest concerns right now amongst even middle and high school students is the amount of pornography on your social media and what information you're privy to. In addition, a lot of these innocent social media sites turn into a site where it can have a toll on my self-esteem, on my mind. I see everything that's going on back home or other campuses, the accomplishments of other students, and I feel not worthy enough. I don't feel good about myself. And again, these things, I go back to my action plan of having that greater understanding of noticing, inviting, challenging, empowering. And that's even challenging people to lessen their time on screens and put the devices down. I like really to challenge students when I'm working with them, drop your devices at the door. Let's not even go there. Let's try to take 2-3 hours without. So there is evidence.
Yes, and I read recently a really wonderful article that was written about the connection between social media and bullying too, and how that has increased then depression and anxiety in young students, especially younger kids. Because before, when something dumb happened to you, it was easily forgotten. And now when something dumb happens to you, it's immortalized with social media and turned into a meme and shared around, and it can become a much greater source of anxiety and depression for kids because of how that's being communicated with people. Please keep sending in questions if you have them. I also just wanted to, we have another one. How have you recommended them to limit screen time? The perception is that smartphones and laptops are necessary. How do you encourage them to get out? I mean, at my own OCF events, we don't do laptops. We just don't do them. And actually, I found that in most cases for me, and Christy, please tell me what you think as well, Father Patrick, that they appreciate the time away because we know at some core level that it's an addiction, that it's not healthy, and they appreciate being asked to put it away for a little while and kind of take a break. What would you say?
Exactly. I was at the same thing. That is, and that's where I love my action plan, be nice, knows about challenge. And that is the challenge, that even activities in your own OCF group, you can begin. We have a whole program that goes in depth because there's a lighter part of Be Nice too. It's to notice the good and the right about every single person. So even in my Goya with the older kids in the group, it's like we start off every meeting, what is good, what is right? Okay, that is just a given. And that takes a lot to actually say these kind of things. The challenge would be we're putting all our devices down, okay? And then even see how it feels after. I know that I love the example of just Ionian Village. My daughter went, her junior in high school, and she came back from camp. It was 3.5 weeks without any social media, and she said it probably was the most cleansing thing for her. And on top of it all, right, my faith, the ability to take confession, praying every day, it's just so amazing, and maybe it is encouraging, okay, I'm going to challenge everybody every day, get on screen and just go to one of the apps and read the daily readings for the day, those type of challenges.
Thank you. Exactly. We had another question that said, does OCF have an an action helpline that students who are struggling could call to find resources and help? And that is a great question. We don't have that, but I do think it is important as advisors that you know the helplines that are available either locally or nationally.
So
And
nationally, let's go for it, right? It's 800-273-8255, and that is a national suicide prevention hotline. So that can be used at somebody that might be struggling right then, but it can also be used for a friend who might be concerned about their friend. And then there's also a national text line, 741-741. And they can put help in that box and it goes directly. I know college campuses, and I think it's important for everybody to know, for the colleges that you are assigned to, have those in your wallet. Have them wherever you are, ready to hand that information out right at the get-go. And I know that when my daughter, she went away to college, and immediately it was me as a parent. This is where the college counseling center is. This is like one of the places that you can access help and assistance at any time that you need it. And if you have a roommate that you're concerned about, because bottom line is that statistically with 1 in 4 being depressed, I have a group of 4 friends, one of us is going to be struggling, I better have ready those resources.
And I know, can I say something? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. So I know also OCF spends a lot of time trying to connect the young people to local parishes. And it's a real struggle. It's a real struggle. I have parents calling me all the time saying, my son, my daughter goes to BU. Can you make sure they come? I said, well, I'll try, but it's really not that easy, because if it's not right outside their door, they can roll out of bed. I mean, we're, within a mile walk of of BU, and it's like in the Sahara Desert on the other side. So, keeping them tied in or helping them to develop maybe for the first time a relationship with the church would be very helpful. I have a lot of people who've come to the church in serious distortions in their life, serious problems, addictions, and things like that. And I've seen so many people, as Christina talked about with her contact, so many people who've changed and who've been, transformed and given the foundation under their feet to fight the good fight that they have to fight. So I would encourage them.
Exactly. And, you have such an important job of engaging people. And I really hope that people leave today knowing that it's not rocket science to talk about these things. It really isn't. And just like Father was saying, we all go through trials and tribulations. We all will face these. And you have this amazing role working with these kids at such a vulnerable age, to see them later in life grow as adults where they're able to handle these trials and tribulations, and they shouldn't be ashamed to talk about them. Sure. And that's where so many times we shame people for feeling this way, that you're not a good Christian. And that's the last thing, is this greater understanding that come to the group. Come on, let's talk about these things, because it is not shame.
Yeah.
I don't think there are any more questions, so I will just wrap things up, and Father Miles can close us in prayer. I just, again, want to encourage you all to have these hard conversations, both in moments of crisis and all along the way in your campus ministry. I think it can be very tempting for us to think of campus ministry as just an extension of religious education, that we're teaching about God, like Father Patrick was saying earlier. But really what every person needs, and especially at this critical and difficult time, is a knowledge of God himself, a relationship with him, and knowing the place to go when you are in crisis, and that place is in the arms of Christ, and that you are the person as the OCF advisor who can offer that to them. And that conversations about our thoughts, conversations about our struggles, those should be the core of the conversations we're having with college students in a way that helps bring them closer to Christ. We did get one last question. Is there a way to reframe the entire mental health discussion with our youth so that we guide them towards the church for help specifically? So I think maybe
Yeah, I could say something. I would say something just quickly about that. That I would, in terms of, I would reframe it by talking about that it's normal. That it's like, why did Christ come to earth? Why did God become man? Why did he was crucified on the cross? Why did he say all the things he didn't? If we weren't supposed to, or not supposed to, but weren't invited to and called to follow him. And directing to the church is like, that's normal human life, is to have the church as part of your life. And it, we can see this historically, how pious people, they would wake up in the morning, they'd go to mountains in the morning on the way to something else. They would pray. They would have a room in their house where they did prayers. And all the great saints said it was their mother and grandmother that gave them the theology. Like Saint Basil the Great said it was his mother and sister, or his mother, who gave him the theology that later he expressed in a fuller form when he had the words for it. But they were the ones who gave it. So, yeah, I think we should say this is normal life. That's the way to reframe it. And if we want to use it in mental health terms, sure, we can use mental health terms. But I would say just in human existential terms.
And I would add to that to say that what's also normal is that we all find our inner world broken and disordered. That it's not abnormal, and that this is an experience only for a small portion of people who should be stigmatized or set to the side or who are bad Christians, but rather all of us have a disorder within ourselves that needs to be reordered by Christ. So I think that might be, Christy might also have something to add, but that might be a way for us to reframe specifically talking about our mental health in terms of orienting towards Christ.
Yep, and I just want everybody to know that your role is just so vital to these college students' lives. I can't even stress that more, that we need more of this on campus, and we as parishes need to send our kids out the door knowing that OCF is everywhere, because you are such a huge protective factor. And I want you to understand, it's not rocket science. It really is noticing when kids are struggling the most, looking at those risk factors, jumping in, inviting, having a loving, caring conversation. That could be the one thing that helps that person. Just the power of prayer, seriously. But then if I'm really concerned, I am going to challenge myself. I'm going to go with them to that counseling office. I'm going to be there. I'm going to say, you know what? I'm on my way over. I'm picking you up, and we're going to go sit together. And while you're sitting there waiting for that counseling appointment, again, pray. And I'm going to be honest with you, that empowers that person to understand that, wow, I have this person from my church, from my faith, understanding the importance that they play in my life. So I thank you for all the work that you're doing, because it's a huge responsibility, but you can do it.
Thank you. All right.
If
you think of any follow-up questions, as always, you can email me. It's just Christina@ocf.net. With that, I think, Father Miles, we will have you close in prayer.
Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Oh Lord, you taught us through your Apostle Paul that we should meditate on all that is good, noble, true, right, praiseworthy, that our minds and our hearts are filled with these good things, that it affects our very being. You taught us out of the darkness into the light with your presence in our lives. We ask you to continue to watch over all the ministries of OCF, to help bring the children, the youth, the kids, the students who are possibly walking in darkness into the light, into your light, and may be clothed with you and continue to walk into your peace, your love, your salvation. The Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Christ is among us.
Yes, and every shall be.
So, Christina?
Yes.
There was that one more question.
I did see that just come in. If anyone would like to stay, we had one more question. What if someone is confessing and communing regularly and still experiencing depression and anxiety? When can you tell that the symptoms require counseling from a psychologist or psychiatrist?
Okay, so this is huge.
Are we still online?
We are still online. I will go ahead and let us answer that question. Forgive me.
I just saw that question pop up, and I really want people to take that seriously. So when this disability of depression and anxiety are affecting a person's mental health, and that is basically their ability to go to school, go to classes, their ability to carry out daily activities, meaning do their homework, get to class, go to work, responsibilities, and it's affecting their relationships, okay, for 2 weeks or longer. It's really super important that at that time, you know what? Have you thought about seeking out some counseling? Have you thought about going to the counseling center? And right there is where that brink is going to be. Oh no, I don't have time. You know what? Let me go with you. Let me go with you to that counselor's office. Let me show you where it is. Let's go together. So seriously, those are the big things. I mean, that I look for their inability to go to classes, to function, to carry out these daily things, and be in satisfying relationships. And at that point, counseling can come from their social workers, then there's counselors, and psychologists and psychiatrists are all great, but I look at anybody that is at that counseling center at that time is going to be the help link. Because I'm always telling people, you are lay people in this industry too. You are not diagnosers, you are not the counselors. So I really recommend, and then get them to keep coming to the OCF activities so you can see that what's going on is good, and then you can say, wow, I can see that you've been to counseling. You are engaging in conversations. It seems to be helping how you're feeling. And then all of a sudden that is taken away the stigma that so many people have about going and seeking out counseling.
Yeah, one thing that I would add to that is, I mean, the question is, kind of sets up either or in a certain sense. When can you tell that the symptoms require counseling? I mean, it's a very specific question. I think it depends. You're looking at an individual person. And I think, you have to, the person who's there, the friend, the spiritual father, has to be responsible for saying, whether you go this way or that way, or suggest one way or the other. I don't think from the point where I'm sitting, I could give a cookie cutter answer. It's just saying, just to say that it's not an either or thing. They can continue to confess and receive and seek help in other areas if they feel that they need it, or if someone else, wants to encourage that. So that would be one thing. And then there was another one, but I don't know if you want to deal with that.
I think that was just another thank you. So
Okay.
Again, thank you everyone. So thank you for sticking around if you were able. And again, please feel free to follow up with me afterwards, and I can reach out to Christy or to Father Patrick and tell us what other resources that you need in your ministry on this topic and on others. And we really want to be there to help provide those for you. So thank you for attending. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. God bless you.